Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Dr. Christensen. This is,
Good afternoon.
yes, here we are for another Wednesday with
Mhm.
Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen, talking about all things health, wellness, and lifestyle on our TV.network and Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, WSTX Bloomberg Radio, Tempo Television, and other amazing platforms to just deliver this health focused programming to you. So, how's it? You're still in the DMV and the
I am until the end of the month. I want to say unfortunately for me because I need to be home. we have a
unfortunately,
we
oh
have
my
a
goodness
this
gracious.
is an election year. There's a lot of work for me to do at home, and
And
but
home
but
is the
I'm
United.
making best use of the time. I have a lot of events and speaking engagements and
Well,
meetings and so
great.
forth.
Well,
Yeah.
we want everyone to know where home is in case they are not as familiar as the whole rest of the world is with you, and that is the United States Virgin Islands. You may
Yes, where we were expecting a little. I don't know if it'll be a tropical depression yet, but it's some rain and a lot of rain this weekend. And
I really hope
hope that's
not.
all we get.
Yeah, I know that, the islands really get a pretty big hit, the Caribbean overall, and,
Mhm.
things like healthcare systems start to really break down. And, they do the best they can with local services, but we hope that this season won't be as they have been in past seasons, that
Ye-
storms will just breeze out and we won't have as health crises, because I think we all need a break from things like the pandemic and things like
Yes.
COVID and monkeypox and just general health issues. And,
Mhm.
interestingly enough, today we are going to talk about something that's going to lead us out into a whole series of conversations around men's health. We've done a lot of conversations around women's health, kind of
Yes.
general health, but still with that focus on women. We didn't ignore you men. We heard you, and now we're going to have some real directed conversations around men's health. As a matter of fact, are hoping that our guests will be able to
I
come
hope so.
in, Dr. Vincent Hayes from Fountain Health Clinic, because he is an expert in this particular area. But, thank goodness we have you, Dr. Christensen, who, as a retired family practitioner, family health and wellness doctor, you've touched on probably just about a lot of different health issues, and degenerative health issues is one of them. And this is the subject that we're going to talk about with a very specific, somewhat, sometimes it's a taboo subject, but it's so important to men and women, and so important to men specifically because it affects their health. And we're
And
talking about, mhm.
go ahead. Go
We're
ahead.
talking about erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
Um, and it's not a lifestyle issue. It is really a very serious health condition that deserves to be really elevated to that level of conversation. So,
Yes, and I do hope that he'll be able to join us. It's interesting. His Fountain Health practice that
mhm.
he's a part of does regenerative health. And I guess regenerative health is one of the ways that regenerative medicine is one of the ways that erectile dysfunction is treated. But the regenerative health can treat a number of things. As a matter of fact, I've had uh, some regenerative health medicine practice on my knees back about 2 years ago. And
Mhm.
maybe we could just start out by that and see if he'll join us to get more before we get more into the erectile
Yeah,
dysfunction.
because I think we need to define for some of us regenerative. I mean, it's kind of obvious in the word, but maybe it's not quite so obvious. So, can you give us like a little bit of a
Oh,
101?
and
Oh, here's Dr. Hayes.
Hayes.
Oh,
Hello.
Hayes can really.
I'm so sorry I'm late. Had a little technical difficulties. I'm sorry.
that's okay. We know that you're busy, busy, busy because you're right there in the clinic. So we appreciate
Correct.
being able to plug in. We were
Yeah.
just going to, Dr. Christensen, meet Dr. Hayes.
Oh, you're
Nice to meet
welcome.
you.
Welcome. We
My
were just
pleasure
going
and
to
honor.
talk about regenerative health before we get into the specific, but I think you probably are better able to explain it, and then I'll talk about my little episode in with regenerative medicine.
Sure. So there's a whole field of medicine where we're looking at ways of, in a sense, reducing injury that's caused by aging, number one,
Mm.
but other injuries and injuries that we do mostly to ourselves, quite honestly. And I'm speaking in terms of smoking related problems, obesity, lack of movement, no exercise. All these things are things that lead to over 80% of most health issues. And we can reduce it and not only reduce those health issues, but actually regenerate the tissues that were destroyed by those incidences. So there's a whole field of medicine that's growing, and it involves physical therapy, nutrition, supplementation, and other types of therapies that are being developed to treat all these type of issues.
It can also treat injury to tissues and organs, right? What I had was called Regenerix for my knees. So that's where they take your blood and spin down your platelets, and they inject the platelet into the damaged tissue or the damaged area, which in my case were my knees. And it really improved quite a bit.
Absolutely.
50% of the pain that I used to have is gone.
That's absolutely one of the most recent advances, and it's called PRP, or platelet replacement therapy, basically. And it's very safe because they only use your own serum, basically. It's done right there while you're in the office.
Absolutely.
And the research is still relatively new, but almost on a weekly basis, there are currently papers that are being published that show the efficacy. And that's one of the things that at the Fountain Health Group, we're really concerned about. In the past, many of these reports were done in mice or rats, and they just don't translate. The doses aren't correct, and the timelines aren't quite there. But everything that we report on, we're using specifically data from very good peer-reviewed, double-blinded human trial studies. So one of the most recent ones, just about a week ago, was using that therapy actually in erectile dysfunction as well.
Okay.
So yes, it's a growing, quickly growing field, and the research is coming. There still needs to be more that's done, but in terms of joints, especially in musculoskeletal injury, the research is there and has shown very, very promising results. And you yourself are a testament to it.
Yes, it is.
Well,
but you're kind of segueing into our main topic, right, Linda?
Yes, it is. Because I was enthralled, because I'm thinking, gee, I need to go to my orthopedic surgeon and deal with the repercussions of an ankle break, if that's the case. And I think of regenerating when I think of things like serums for anti-aging. But when we talk about cells, we're talking about the entire body. So yes, our topic for today is erectile dysfunction. And we want to talk about it because this starts us out in our series around men's health. And we haven't neglected the men out there. There's some very unique and very specific issues like prostate cancer we'll talk about later on. And, just really touching on a very deeper subject that really gets to the heart of maybe self-esteem issues. But we need to take it out of that lane and put it into the health issues to rectify that. And that is erectile dysfunction. So tell us so we know basically what erectile dysfunction is, but can you give us kind of that body of science that deals with that? What's the specialty area?
Well, it's complicated because it involves the whole person. And many times, especially men, don't bring in that psychosocial part of any disease process. For some men, erectile dysfunction solely is balanced on that, meaning they have performance anxiety one time, and then the next time it's like a snowball rolling downhill because of this first incident, which happens to every man sooner or later. They then think they won't be able to perform the next time, excuse me, and then it becomes a psychological burden that they can't get past. Excuse me. I have a little cold.
All of us are suffering from.
Yeah, we have the hay fever and the allergy. So welcome aboard to our program. We'll deal with that one later.
In terms of the physiologic aspect, it really just comes down to blood flow, right? And when you think of blood flow, you think of arteries, of course, and veins.
Yes.
Well, arteries are made almost entirely of muscle. And we know, we hear the commercials every day. Starting in our late 20s and early 30s, we all lose muscle mass. But no one thinks about the muscle mass that's associated with arteries. Now, in men, obviously, those arteries are what control the blood flow, and having an erection is about hydraulic pressure. More flow in, less flow out. That gives you the good erection. So if you have an issue where your flow is decreasing due to the muscle mass of the arteries of your penis being smaller, and also blockages from, again, the wear and tear, poor diet, cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, lack of exercise, all those things play into how well your arteries work throughout your body. And the penis is sort of like the canary in the coal mine, right? There's lots of studies that show once you have erectile dysfunction, you're at a 30 to 50% chance of having some other vascular issue in your body, whether it's cardiac, your brain, anywhere else. So when men tell me this, I tell them, look, you better have a good primary care doctor as well, because you're at risk for so many other things. So in general, again, it's about blood flow, either some blockage results from diabetes, cholesterol, and also just weakening of the muscles that control the blood flow.
I understand that heart disease also, sometimes it can be the canary for heart disease. People that really don't realize that their blood flow is compromised other places, and it shows up first in the penis. Yeah.
So in general, the blood vessels of the penis are smaller, so they are affected earlier than the other vessels. That's why, again, 30 to 50% of men who have erectile dysfunction within 5 to 10 years may find they have heart disease. They may find they actually may develop dementia. Why? Because of decreased flow to the brain. So it's really a key element. The problem is the taboo associated with the subject, right? Now, as you see, I don't have hair, so I don't go to the barber anymore. But going to the barber in the past, especially for men in our community, was the way to get knowledge in some ways. But all guys do in the barbershop is talk about their conquest. If they were honest in saying, look, I'm having this issue, this is an issue that we need to know more about. And quite honestly, many primary care doctors, because it's taboo, they'll ask the guy kind of sheepishly, are you having problems in the bedroom? They won't even say erectile dysfunction. They pretty much throw Viagra and Cialis at you, and then you're on your own, quite honestly. And that's, again, that doesn't really get to even to the root cause of the issue. It's just treating the symptom.
Yeah, I had patients with, I'm a family physician, and yes, different kinds of sexual dysfunction. I almost did a fellowship in sexual medicine, I didn't go ahead with it, but it was a significant part of my practice, both men and women.
And it's so fascinating because we don't think of it in terms of the association with other issues. We think of it just as a performance issue, but it's important to understand. And let's just repeat some of those risks, and including, and isn't trauma one of them? Injury also to the spinal cord and the penis, and things that restrict blood flow or injure, as you said, the muscles, because that's not something that we really think about, arteries and muscles, and therefore the issue and the problem ensues.
Right.
And then why are the arteries have some blockage elsewhere or there, as well as any other issues as it relates to the muscle. So that's high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes. I've even read where things like depression or stress, anxiety, of course, that ramps up a lot of different issues in terms of stress management. But, Parkinson's disease, there are other things, multiple sclerosis. Are these also issues? Tobacco use, because these are all lifestyle driven issues that can actually be addressed.
Right.
In terms of diet, exercise.
As you answer, can you also add in, prostate issues?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as Dr. Christensen knows, about 80% of the diseases in America are preventable. And that's simply by mostly what you mentioned, Linda, that's diabetes. And diabetes can be controlled to a great extent by watching our weight, being in the right weight distribution, the right BMI. We can go into some detail about that later if you like.
Mhm.
Smoking. So diet, smoking, inactivity. Many people think when you retire, you're just supposed to sit down. No, that's when you really start to move, right?
Mhm.
I mentioned tobacco. So those few things, if we worked on that, we could eliminate many disease processes. But it's something that I ask every male patient I see, because if they're a smoker, I know they're going to have issues with their blood vessels. If
Mm.
they're overweight, that diabetes leads to increased sugar moieties on the cells.
Mhm.
That's a sign that there's damage that's occurring to those cells. So that damages the blood vessels.
Mhm.
Inactivity makes the muscles weaker, the whole body, including the vessels, the muscles that are in blood vessels. So those things are very important, and I address those with each patient that I see. And it's pretty easy to see those folks who take care of those problems because they don't have all the issues that we have. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're in the right BMI, you don't smoke, you exercise, you still can develop erectile dysfunction. It's just a matter of time that the muscles will get weaker. Now, luckily, it won't necessarily be because of a blockage or anything like that, but it's a matter of the muscles getting weaker. Now, prostate cancer in itself presents another issue, and it depends on the treatment that you get for it. So, if you get even the most up to date robotic surgery, there's still a chance that you may damage the nerves. And nerves take a long time to regenerate and to get back to normal. So, after prostate surgery, if you have erectile dysfunction, it doesn't mean it's permanent, but you've got to wait at least 6 months to more like a year before you can tell if you're going to have any response. Now, during that year, though, of course, if the nerves aren't working, guess what? You're not feeding impulses to the muscles, so they're getting even weaker.
Mm.
So even after your nerves have come back to their normal state, you may still have erectile dysfunction because now you've had a year where you didn't have input from the nerve to those muscles.
Right.
So it's a complicated issue. All the other things you mentioned um, work in slightly different ways, like the myasthenia gravis and so forth.
Mm.
So the nerve segments that control erection are in the sacral nerves, the lower nerves of the body. So
Mhm.
typically, an injury to your lower spine or your sacrum can cause these issues to occur as well. Specifically, the parasympathetics are the nerves that control blood flow in, and it's segment S1, 2, 3, and 4. There's a little mnemonic. It's something we used to say in med school. S2, 3, 4, lift your penis off the floor. Those are the nerves specifically.
How come they never taught me that one?
You didn't get that in
We
med
had a lot of mnemonics to remember.
Right. So that was one that maybe just me and my guy friends knew about that one.
See, we have to have health equity in the medical schools. So this is the question that I have, because I would think if I were a man listening to this, and we hope our male listeners and our male viewers are taking notes, because this is really important information, that to be careful when they're playing sports, because it sounds like an injury can be very traumatic, obviously, but have some repercussions as it relates to erectile, creating or stimulating or being a serious cause of erectile dysfunction. Would that be a fair statement to make?
Absolutely. And again, excuse me, I'm so sorry. Because of the taboo nature of any injury to the pelvic area in men, sometimes they don't even come in and say, look, this is the issue going on. One of the most common things, not really related to erectile dysfunction, is testicular torsion. And I'm sure, Dr. Christensen, you've probably seen that. Guys
Mhm.
will wait hours to come in and say, I have pain in my testicle after I got kicked, after I slipped, after it may be nothing that it may happen spontaneously, actually.
Mhm.
And Dr. Christians and I know you have to get that treated within 6 to 8 hours or you'll lose that testicle.
Oh,
So
wow.
trauma to the area is very important. and needs to be addressed immediately because the tissues are so sensitive that if the pressure is too high or not high enough, it will literally, the tissue will die and can't be replaced. So trauma also works in that, for instance, a straddle injury. When you do that, there are parts of the bone of the pelvis, the pubic rami, and so forth, and that's where the nerves run. So if you get a fracture there, you can actually tear the nerves, and then you lose function forever, basically.
So that would be a potential if you're like riding your bicycle in
Riding your bike. Nowadays, the skateboarders who go along the rails, jumping a fence, playing football, or even basketball if you're up in the air and you land on another guy's shoulder. I mean, these are common things that I've seen. So my majority of my career prior to this, I'm an ER specialist, a trauma specialist. So those are the things that I would see. And again, this is from, it's anecdotal evidence, but it's the patients I see. They come in hours and hours later, like, well, what took you so long? And I try and say, look, this is an important part of your life. Why would you not take care of it? And why wait so long? It just doesn't make sense.
Well, I think everyone thinks that they have done what the two of you have done and gone through medical school and go into a first responder mode and kind of self-treat, or they apply the wise tales, or they go online and get what they think, put the ice pack on and they can keep going. And I don't know, it is important, as you said, that you don't want someone to lose their testicle when they can actually get support and help and to go to the emergency room, because within 6 hours, the potential, that's pretty devastating, I would think.
Absolutely.
That's important information for men to hear. Sometimes it's being embarrassed, and men are not, until it gets, probably beyond treatment, they just prefer not to go to the doctor or hospital.
Yeah, it's one of the reason I mentioned the barbershop, because it's a place where you can disseminate information. Again, I know part of your career, Dr. Christensen, is in politics. As years have gone on, we have less and less teaching of medical education, and I'm talking about for the layperson. So less sex education in school. And as the years have gone on medically, as you know, they cut our time down that we have to spend with the patient.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
If I had more time with each patient, I could. One of the root meanings of the word doctor is to teach. Right. The best doctors are the best teachers, in my opinion. If I have a patient and they walk out the room and they look over to the nurse or another staff person and say, I don't understand a word he said. I just wasted my time and their time. Right.
Yeah.
So,
patient competency is extremely important. And
absolutely.
I applaud some of the efforts that are out there. Like in our program, we believe that this is a great platform to deliver that health information that's not only interesting, but useful and practical and can be put into immediate use to meet the experts such as yourself, to get the information, make the contact, even if they're in a different place in our viewing audience, because we broadcast pretty widely, both in the Caribbean, United States, parts of South America. We do want to have individuals have access to you. And so we're going to come up in just a few seconds to our first commercial break. And when we come back, let's talk about some of how do you even find out? What are some of the common tests and procedures? We want to go beyond just what we believe to be the obvious. We want to make sure that people are truly educated in that ability to go forward. So
the treatments, I think.
And the treatments, yes. So we're going to come right back. We're going to break right now for a commercial. This is Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen. And we thank you, Dr. Hayes, for joining us for this important subject. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Good if we could directly import some of this from right out of the farm fresh here, so it will help our produce section. But certain things we have to admit that we can't grow in the Virgin Islands because of our temperature. Certain things grow better when they have a little cool temperature. But the collaboration is what we want, where we can exchange processes, and we can do some things down here, like the wine country we spoke about. Most of the wine made up here is from all of it is from grapefruit. We make wine in the Virgin Islands of the Caribbean from other fruits. So even that as an exchange can be something good, since they seem to be proficient in making wine. We have certain foods that we would like to be better at in making wine. Those collaborations can be a good food.
Yeah, these type of economic exchanges also allow us to see what other people are doing and create ideas that we can bring back home in regard to that. So it's great to see how this farm is operating, not only in the blackberry patch that we're in, but tomatoes, corn, a variety of different
tomatoes.
things.
I hope you got those on the video. That's big beefy tomatoes. Again, I don't even eat tomatoes, and I wanted to take a bite into one. Fresh food growing is a big thing. Like you hear that they have a roadside every day. They out there roadside fresh farm, fresh market. They said they didn't even intend to do it, but it's been so good. So they kept on doing it, and that's what we want farmers to do. From the farm to the stand to the table. You want to decrease the amount of stops the food make from the farm to the table. The shorter, the quicker you can get from farm to table, the better we're doing, and the better food we're supplying to our residents.
All right, and we're here to continue to support agriculture. As you know, in our Vision 2040, agrotech and agriculture is, one of our main industries, so we need to continue to grow that. It has great potential.
It's a small industry that a lot of people can. I don't want to call it a small industry, but it's a cottage industry that a lot of people can participate in. But collectively, it's big. Food is big. Food is an inflexible commodity. One thing we do each and every day is buy food. So the more food we can have providing at home, that's more job. That's better for the economy because money's spreading across.
Today we're taking a little vacation on the west end of St. Croix, visiting a seaside restaurant called the Beachside Cafe here at Sandcastles on the Beach.
The atmosphere is just wonderful.
You just feel very welcome when you're here.
Hi! I'd like to introduce Chris and Ted, who are the owners of Beachside Cafe and also Sandcastles on the Beach. This is amazing!
Thank you.
Sandcastle on the Beach is quiet and friendly, relaxing.
I often entertain guests, and this is the one place I always try to bring people.
Tell us a little bit about the hotel.
Well, the hotel is a 25-room hotel. We have 10 different room types within that. We also have, of course, our greatest asset, the ocean out there, which our side of the island is very calm typically. So it's the best swimming beach and also great for snorkeling.
And just walking and doing a nice walking beach tour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Best beach access is right here, so we love them.
And we're also fortunate we have just up the way Sandy Point National Park, and then Frederickstead Town is just a mile away. Mm-hmm. And so we're really fortunate to be in this perfect spot.
Welcome back. This is the Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle Program with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen. And our guest today is Dr. Vincent Hayes from the Fountain Health Clinics, Fountain Health Group, to talk about a very important subject, erectile dysfunction, as we kick off our series on men's health. And so we left out the last segment talking about all the reasons why this occurrence happens, and the very important reason to generally get ahead of your general health and wellness, because there are a lot of ways to mitigate this particular condition. And we talked about that. And so now we want to really talk about not just the risk factors, and we're going to touch back on that before we end the show, but let's go into some of the common tests. How do we understand and the treatments and procedures to support someone that is experiencing a man who's experiencing erectile dysfunction? Because sometimes when someone would say, well, it's kind of obvious, but maybe not quite so obvious.
Yeah, because there are different reasons. I mean, sometimes it is anxiety because of a time that they didn't perform as they would have liked. And so there are different ways. Go ahead, Dr.
In terms of the obvious, quote unquote, one of the most common things that happens or begins to happen is less frequent spontaneous morning erections. So throughout the night, when men get good sleep, and I'm talking about good 6 or 7 to 8 hours of sleep, they have spontaneous erections throughout the night. And that's because obviously you have to have good blood flow to the tissue to maintain it. You should typically have one when you awake in the morning too. Most men do until they start to have this issue. So when you notice that you're having less frequent spontaneous erections, that's the perfect time to seek out help. And at that point, you can do some things, and we'll talk about a treatment that you can do prophylactically that is a root cause treatment, meaning we're not giving you a medication to treat a symptom, we're giving you a treatment to actually treat the root cause, which is decreased blood flow. So that's one of the more prominent ones. Whenever I see a patient, we actually have a written score called a SHIM test that looks at a number of different factors in terms of performance. Is it related to anxiety, stress, and all these other things? So subjectively, again, we have the SHIM test, and the patient can tell us if they're, a lot of guys aren't really aware of their own bodies, quite honestly. So, but that spontaneous erection is one of the earliest signs. And
so may I ask a question as it relates to just to that, because you're thinking erection period is brought on by some type of external stimulation, some thought process, something they've seen, something they're, sex that they're about to engage in with their partner. Are you saying that this is just how the body functions, like breathing? It just happens, and it happens at certain times of the days, particularly at night when you're at your
absolutely.
Night.
So
Morning.
the younger you are, the more spontaneous erections you have, basically. So even a young boy will have spontaneous erections, not related to any sexual thought. It's because it's nutritive or it supplies nutrients to the tissue of the penis, right? The penis is an external structure, so its blood supply is different than other parts of our core body. So our core gets blood flow all the time, or by moving our arms, we get blood flow to our muscles. Well, we're not using the penis other than to urinate or in sexual times, but that's a relatively rare time. So to maintain that tissue, the body naturally has spontaneous erections throughout the day to keep blood flow going. So as we get older, loss of that is a sign that you're headed towards erectile dysfunction. Now, as you mentioned, just because you're having fewer spontaneous erections, you can be stimulated to have an erection at a sexual time or through, an image or whatever else. So that's different than the spontaneous erection.
Okay.
Spontaneous erection occurs just based on physiology. It's a needed thing to nourish the tissue.
I'm glad you made that distinction. I didn't want to stop your thought process, but I wanted to help our male listeners, and particularly our younger male listeners, to understand, because sometimes that alone can be the source of embarrassment, that you have something that involuntary happens at maybe one of the most inopportune times.
Right.
To understand that that's really healthy, because you're saying that the blood flow is not restricted. It is actually required to get to that part of the body. And that's, so when that doesn't happen is when there should be something that alerts in you that it's time to talk to your urologist, because that's the type of doctor that deals with this issue, correct?
Right. You can, primary care doctor can help to a degree. Urologist will do initially pretty much the same thing a primary care specialist does. And again, the blanket right now is to throw Viagra, Cialis at you, and then after that you're kind of on your own. But in terms of an actual treatment, what we do is we use sound wave technology. So let's take a step back. Every patient I see, I ask them about their diet, sleep habits, exercise, if they smoke, and I think those are the main things. If those issues are present, we need to tell them, and we do tell them, you have to work on those too, because again, it affects all of the body, but specifically the blood vessels. So if they do have an issue with erectile dysfunction And we know it's because the blood vessels are weaker, the muscles of the blood vessels are weaker, and there may be some degree of blockage. So using a sound wave, a low frequency sound wave, what we do is we actually exercise those muscles. So let's imagine that you're in the gym and you're doing a push-up. When you do a push-up, men and women, you stress the pectoral muscles of the chest and the triceps at the back of the arm. Well, what does the body do? The body reacts to stress. And stress is not always a bad thing when it comes to exercise. So the brain tells the body, well, the brain sees, okay, I see this area is being stressed on a regular basis. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make it stronger in reaction to that stress. So that's how exercise works. Well, for the penis, you can't lift weights. At least I haven't met a guy yet that can lift weights. Never mind. I was going to say something.
I don't think we want to. Well, the more activity. So let's explore that in a different way.
So sexual activity in itself is not direct exercise for the blood vessels themselves. So what I'm talking about is using a sound wave directed towards the blood vessels that we stress. Now, we don't injure them, but we stress them. The sound wave is a low frequency sound wave. And as you know, bass carries a lot of energy. So it's a low bass frequency, and it causes enough of a deflection in the walls of the muscle. So just like doing a push-up or lifting weights, you're stressing that muscle. Over time, the brain reads that, releases growth factors and hormones, and the muscles become stronger. Not only that, the research shows you actually develop more blood vessels, just like a bodybuilder. Wow. When you look at a bodybuilder, yes, they have big muscles, men and women, but they also have extra blood vessels. That's called neovascularization. So not only are we strengthening the muscles there, you're actually creating new blood vessels. That part is so positive, they're actually looking at using the same technique on cardiac vessels. You know why? Because you can develop a natural bypass around a potential blockage. So their cardiac vessels are a bit different because they're bigger. They actually can use an intra-artery sound wave producer inside the artery. The arteries of the penis are too small to do that. Plus, the arteries of the penis are a bit curved to allow for expansion, basically. So basically, that's the treatment. We actually take the muscles, the blood vessels of the penis, and work them out, basically, for you. Now, in my opinion, the future for this is not to wait until you have the problem, is to use it prophylactically. So that's why this show is so important, to get this out to men that say, hey, I'm noticing less frequent erections. I'm not performing like I used to with my partner. Let me go see someone and see if I can nip this in the bud before it gets too bad. Now, the problem is that it's not permanent. And why? Well, because muscles get weaker over time. But it lasts typically anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So imagine having this treatment and you get a tune-up every 3 to 5 years. That means no medication, so no side effects from the medication. There's no downtime. Actually, once you start the treatment, we encourage sexual activity because it's a matter of muscle memory, reigniting those pathways again. So this is, again, a root cause treatment without side effects of medication. Are the side effects for the treatment? Very, very rare. Occasionally, we still have guys who need to be on certain blood thinners, the old school like Coumadin and warfarin. They may get a little bruising. But other than that, it's not painful. And again, there's no downtime. We actually encourage sexual activity from day one. So, the technique is great. And again, as I mentioned, they're now experimenting on other parts of the body. This technique was developed about 25 years ago. And we actually do use it to treat other issues. We use it to treat peripheral neuropathy.
I was thinking that might work.
Absolutely. We use it to treat poorly healing diabetic wounds. It's all about bringing blood flow in. Most pro sports team has these machines, but they use a different head because it treats musculoskeletal injuries, right? You're bringing in healing oxygen and nutrients, so therefore they heal faster. If you ever wonder why LeBron James gets a sprained ankle, he can play a week later, and you and I are still on crutches for 6 weeks because he's getting this treatment.
Okay.
My goodness. So it's when I think about that, I wonder if it's going to get to the level of innovation where we would have something at home to support a minor incident like
Right.
sprained, minor bruise
Yeah.
that requires some type of treatment just like that in order to do,
Sure.
just you mentioned, infused blood into that area, possibly really regenerate, veins or even stimulate new muscle, stimulate muscle for increased endurance, all of the above.
Right. Well,
Can you-
they do have a nerve stimulator called a TENS unit that you can use at home. But self-diagnosing could be a little dangerous.
Yeah.
Using this technique, we also know that if you do it too much, you can actually cause damage. There is a home unit for erectile dysfunction. I won't mention the name, but I've actually called the manufacturer. And again, the key is that this is a sound wave that does it. When I called the manufacturer, I got a big runaround. I think theirs is more like a massager. I don't think it really does the same thing, but they're selling tons of them. And we actually have several patients who bought those, didn't work, and then they come and see us and have success.
So there's not a one prescription for all. And what we see in the
Correct.
audience, we appreciate that these potential devices are helpful to some, but the real reason that we're having this conversation is to encourage going to your doctor to have you fully diagnosed, really address the root causes, whether they be psychological or physical, and then have the right treatment plan for you.
Absolutely.
That may include the commercial off-the-shelf products, but it sounds like this is very promising with the ultrasound
It does.
therapy. That sounds
Well, yeah, it's
You have other treatments as well.
right. It's not,
But
it's not
at a different stage of
absolutely.
erectile
It's
dysfunction.
not ultrasound. It's actually a sound wave itself. So
sound waves.
if you compare, for instance, if you're listening to music and it has a lot of bass, you can feel that in your bones and your chest. That's a pure sound wave. It's not an ultrasound. And this is exactly what we use, a pure sound wave. Now, the importance about the home use, I'm glad you mentioned that also, is that the sound wave can be generated and we know exactly the depth that it can penetrate tissue. And that's why trying this at home could be dangerous possibly, because for muscular tissue, especially if you're a big athletic person, you actually have to then penetrate more. Some of the heads that these machines have, you can actually penetrate up to 15 centimeters. And you certainly don't want to be doing that at home on the penis. That would be a big mistake.
No, you do not. You do not. My goodness gracious. So is this condition, because we've talked a lot about genetic counseling for things like sickle cell and other health issues. Would we ever associate erectile dysfunction with hereditary issues or something that has been found to be prominent in a family line?
And I'd like to get into some of the other treatments as well.
Oh,
Sure.
yes.
Run out of time.
So yeah, genetically, not really. I mean, men tend to follow their lifestyle and physical being of their fathers. So in terms of genetics, yes, that. But there's no, that I know of specifically, genetic disease that leads to erectile dysfunction directly. Now, again, things like myasthenia gravis, a few other nerve diseases, yes, but that's not a direct component of the genetic process. So no, there's no real genetics that's associated with
That's
erectile.
good that we can check that off for all of those who are like, whoo, if they knew that their father, because that's like, that's the same conversation we have when we think of women who are going through menopause. Is this something that I'm going to also go through as well?
Right.
Same way, but for different reasons. So so Donna, you wanted to talk about more common.
Yeah, there are some other, we've talked about some preventative and early treatments, but there are some that, come up as for different causes of the erectile dysfunction or progression of it.
Like hormones. Are you referring to things like the male, a certain measure of hormones?
There's some injectables that can be used. There's some prostheses that can be used.
So there's an injectable, and there's also a suppository you can use called, brand name is called Muse. But the injectable, you actually inject at the base of the penis with a very fine needle. Sounds a bit scary for some guys, and for some guys it is. but it works directly to, it's sort of like adrenaline. It works directly to increase blood flow, and it's dose dependent, meaning you can actually kind of dial in how long you want the erection to last, and you can dose yourself. You get the erection, and it lasts for a certain amount of time. During that time, if you have an orgasm, the effect can actually last past the orgasm. So you can have an erection for minutes to even longer than that after the orgasm. But that's a very good technique for certain people. For instance, for guys who've had prostatectomies due to prostate cancer, because the nerves aren't working, sometimes this treatment works because the end organ blood vessels are still working, but they're not connected to the nerves. So they can still have an erection. Now, their sensation will be somewhat different. They still may have an orgasm, but imagine being married for 30 years and having this as an important part of your life, and now you can't provide that for your wife.
Right.
The psychological aspects for you and for her are huge. So even if it's not quite the same for you, you get that emotional response. But again, some men do have normal orgasms and everything else with it. There's another version of it that's a bit newer, where you actually take a suppository and put it into the penis itself, and it does the same thing. Some men like it, some don't. The major side effect is just like for folks who have to still use insulin. You don't become resistant, but it can cause a little scarring where you're making the injections. And you don't have as many places to choose from. So eventually it can become an issue as well. But it's a good opportunity in certain cases.
And would that be something like in injecting for insulin if you're diabetic that you would do at home? This is something that would be prescribed, and you would
prescribe it. So typically when a man is learning to do this and it's an option, the first time it's done will be in the doctor's office. So they show you how to do it. But then when you're at home, you do it when you want to have that intimate contact with your partner.
Oh, okay. So
Right.
this is something in advance of that.
Correct.
When you're ready.
So when the time is there and you know you're going to have sex, you give yourself the injection. And again, depending on the strength, it can actually last for anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes, if that's what you choose. And it's again based on the strength of the injection. The other most common treatments are medications, the PDE5 enzyme inhibitors, that's Viagra, Cialis, Levitra. Now they work at a level that your normal nerve signals work. They kind of work through the back door. So when your man is going to be aroused sexually, the nerve releases several chemical components. The final common pathway is called CAMP. CAMP is just a transmitter, and basically that's what starts the reaction to having an erection. The medications work through the back door by breaking down the enzyme that breaks down CAMP. So the natural levels of CAMP rise over time, and that's why there's a delay. When you take Viagra, you have to wait an hour or two because you've broken down that enzyme. Now the natural stores of CAMP have to rise. So that's how that works. Viagra is the oldest one. It has more side effects than others. Yeah, I tell men, if you look in the back of some of these magazines, they have creams that can make your penis larger. Well, you put it on with your hand, why doesn't your hand get larger?
That's a good point.
So the same thing with Viagra, though. If it's going to give you an erection, that means it's increasing blood flow, but that's why you get a headache sometimes. Sinus congestion, change in your vision. The newer ones, for Cialis and Levitra, have a little less of the side effects. So I always recommend some of the newer ones. But for some men, Viagra works great. Also, there's recent studies that show if you take it sublingually, number one, it works faster because you're going directly to the bloodstream, and you reduce side effects that way. So in our clinic, we only prescribe in sublinguals. We don't use it.
And I wonder what's the any compounding issues with other types of medicines if someone is diabetic and they're taking insulin, or if
Or
they,
they have another illness, suppose they have heart disease or.
Absolutely.
exactly.
So the big one is the nitroglycerin. The nitroglycerin is a super expander of blood vessels, and that's important because if you're having chest pain related to your heart, you need to get blood flow there immediately. But if you're on a chronic or a long-acting nitroglycerin, you can't use these medications begin because you're going to expand the blood vessels and potentially drop your pressure so low that you have no blood flow to the brain or the heart, and potentially could succumb to that. So if you're on nitroglycerin, you can't use these medications at all.
Why did you make this decision to really focus your practice in this area?
Well,
And you talk about how prevalent.
Yes, how prevalent this is. I mean, it is very prevalent. Yes.
well, I would say it's almost 100%, because eventually this will happen to all men. Some men are more fortunate in that it happens later in life, but there's almost a direct correlation, as we talked about from the very beginning. Guys who are active, good weight range, don't smoke, sleep well. Sleep is important in sexual function, especially for men, because if you don't sleep well, your cortisol level goes up. And guess what? That's a direct negative effect on testosterone. So as your cortisol level goes up, your testosterone goes down and you can't perform. So guys who are taking care of those things and not smoking, they tend to present later. Now, not everyone, but the guy who, I had one patient who was 73. He was a vegan. He was a runner. At 73, he had a six-pack. He didn't develop the issue till he was 72, but he was one of the fastest responders in terms of our treatment. So again, all those things make a difference.
Yes.
The prevalence, I can't say 100%, but if you're not taking care of yourself, eventually it will happen to you.
So if individuals, we have 1 minute left. Actually, we are just at the hour. We just turned over. How would someone be able to get a hold of you? If you can share that really.
There's also prostheses, right, that you can use.
Right, absolutely. So that's kind of the last step, a prosthetic, or to have surgery where you have an implant. And there's a lot of issues with that as well. But right now, the easiest way is we're starting a YouTube channel where we're going to go into these topics, but more in depth. So we'll have a general out view, and then we'll have several after that goes in depth. And the name of the YouTube channel is simply The Health Fountain, The Health Fountain at YouTube. Our first few will be up by the end of the week.
Is that letter D or THE?
THE, sorry. The Health Fountain. Right.
Okay.
HE.
Make sure that folks are clear.
Right.
The Health Fountain. Well, we're going to wish you well in that. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to bring you back when you do your launch, and we're going to talk more about how men can just really get ahead of this for their entire life. And what can we do to get.
It's been a very informative program. We really thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, have a good afternoon, everyone. This is Health, Wellness, and Lifestyle with Linda Dorman and Dr. Donna Christensen, and our guest today, the Dr. Vincent Hayes. Have a great afternoon here on OurTV.network.
Bye-bye.